lift capability. Definitely exceeds lift capability.
Welcome back to Marvelous Videos. I'm Rylan, and today we'll be looking at the Sandworms, these indestructible, valuable, and disastrous creatures of the Dune universe, explored. Frank Herbert's novel was published in 1967, and turned out to be the world's best-selling sci-fi novel. Furthermore, it is also considered to be one of the best novels to be written ever. Frank Herbert created an intergalactic feudal society of sorts in the far future, where kings and emperors ruled to fight for a substance called the Spice Melange, which gives humans long lives, superhuman strength, and also aids in space travel. However, the coveted Spice Melange is located on the planet of Arrakis, and is inadvertently protected by huge creatures called the Sandworms. These creatures would grow to lengths of about 1,000 meters. Herbert's first novel, Dune, received great positive reviews from critics and earned a Nebula Award for Best Novel, as well as a Hugo Award. Frank Herbert wrote 6 Dune novels, and in 1984, David Lynch produced the first Dune movie, which was followed by 2 TV shows, one in 2000 and another in 2003. A second Dune film is set to release later this year, and is being directed by Denis Villeneuve, the man behind such films as the 2016 sci-fi film Arrival. Before we go into today's analysis, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small step for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now, on with the video.
We need altitude. Or suck us down.
Capacity overload.
What are sandworms? Why are they important? The planet of Arrakis, also known as Dune or Arrakis, was a harsh and arid planet filled with deserts on its surface. It was located in the Canopus star system. The planet was important because it provided a substance called the Spice Melange, something that helped in space travel. The sandworms, or Shai-Hulud, were native species of the planet Arrakis, and lived in the vast sand dunes and the treacherous deserts. It was these sandworms that were vital for the creation of the Spice Melange. Due to their gigantic form and impact, they were both feared and honored. They are highly territorial creatures that would fight another to save the territory or die trying. These humongous creatures could grow up to about 450 meters in height. When compared to the largest animal found on Earth, the blue whale, the sandworms grow 13 times longer than the whales. However, some believe that the creatures can even grow up to 700 to even 1,000 meters. That's a freaking kilometer! But since most things about the planet Arrakis are shrouded in mystery, these deductions about the sandworms could be flawed. Much like anacondas and even the great white shark, it is believed that the creatures keep growing until the time that they die, and they can live up to thousands of years. The sandworm's outer skin is orange in color, and thick and rough in texture. Because the skin is created by thousands of tough and hardened scales, each a few square feet in area, it protects the gargantuan creature from internal sand invasion and other hostile events. The Fremen, or the people who considered that Arrakis was their home, discovered that while the outer skin was impenetrable because of overlapping and interlocking of the scales, it could also be exploited by compromising the integrity of the skin. This could be achieving by prying open an edge and allowing sand to get to the softer inside of the sandworm, which causes intense levels of irritation to the sandworm. To stop more sand from getting inside, the sandworm refrains from diving into the sand, but rolls over so that the damaged portion is high above the ground. When in this position, a Fremen can ride the worm. Worm riding is often considered a sacred act, and is sometimes used to travel distances. In fact, just the way light is used to measure distance between planets in light years, the Fremen measured distances in sandworms. One unit could cover the distance until the sandworm got exhausted and dived into the sand. Interestingly enough, the legendary H.R. Giger also envisioned the sandworms, but these creatures were inspired by the dragons from European mythology that guarded treasure, and the dragon in Beowulf that also guarded gold. Much like these mythological and literary creatures that protected something valuable, The sandworms also attack those who attempt to harvest them. A sandworm's approach towards a particular place would almost always get indicted by lightning due to the static discharge of electricity. Furthermore, sandworms get attracted to rhythmic vibrations and movements. For this reason, travelers had to move without a rhythm, because the sandworms often perceived rhythm for prey, in the form of smaller sandworms, or enemies in the form of mature ones. Therefore, the sandworms are considered to be cannibalistic in nature. Although its diet majorly consists of sand and other inorganic compounds found in the crust of Arrakis, some believe that they eat the sand planktons for further nourishment. However, water served as a catalyst that accelerated its metabolism and made the organism unstable, causing organ failure. In other words, water was severely poisonous to sandworms, even in small amounts. Such deaths would be excruciatingly painful for them. What is Spice Melange? The extremely arid lands of Arrakis are the only natural source of the Spice Melange, which is considered to be the most valuable commodity in the entirety of the universe. It is also a drug that increases the lifespan, provides enhanced vitality, and heightens awareness in people. But the most important use is its capability to unlock prescience that aids in interstellar travel. As a result, it helps in cultural development as people started traveling more and to vast distances through warp space. Because it was a naturally occurring awareness spectrum narcotic, it became the building block and base of increased commerce and technological development in the universe for several millennia. The Spice Melange was found inside sand trouts, or the larval form of the sandworm. Thousands of sand trouts would be present in a location deep below the surface, and they would suck large water bodies, transforming any region into vast deserts. However, when sand trouts are squeezed, Spice Melange comes out of them. In other cases, the fungal excretion of a sand trout would get dissolved in water. When this substance would reach the surface, the intense heat and atmosphere of Arrakis would lead to a chemical reaction, producing the Spice Melange. Spice Melange helped the Fremen to create several articles, like chemical explosives, spice fiber, spice paper, and so forth. To give you a perspective of its value, it was believed that one case of Spice Melange was enough to purchase an entire planet. Such a valuable substance is bound to have several properties. It has mind-altering properties that can awaken the dormant parts of the human brain and mind, even enhancing sensory perceptions. And strong doses of the substance can aid in prescience. Apart from the psychological benefits, the Spice Melange also increases life expectancy and fortifies immunity, so much so that it can triple the average life expectancy. But as mentioned earlier, it is essentially a narcotic component and creates addiction. Anatomy and lifespan of sandworms explored. Sandworms are creatures that are similar in appearance to humongous segmented worms or ringworms, and they can also be compared to lampreys. These cylindrical and elephantine worms are fearsome creatures with an array of razor-sharp crystalline teeth that are used for rasping through the sand and rocks alike. Its mouth itself is about 80 meters in diameter. Liet Kynes described the sandworms as incredibly tough, and further notes that the only way to kill them is through applying high-voltage electric shock. But even that has to be applied at different ring segments. However, atomics also help the cause because they're the only explosives that are potent enough to kill an entire mature worm. The conventional forms of explosives are rendered useless against these creatures because each ring segment of a sandworm is sentient and has a life of its own. As discussed earlier, water is a potent weapon against the sandworms, and since it is a rare resource on the planet of Arrakis, water is a feasible weapon only against the smaller sandworms. According to Herbert himself, the microscopic creatures called the sand planktons feed on the Spice Melange that the sandworms have scattered on the sands of Arrakis. These sand planktons in turn become the food for the sandworms. in addition to the inorganic substances found on the crust of Arrakis. As discussed earlier, the sand trouts thrive on water, but the sandworms don't. The sand trouts get attracted to even the smallest amounts of water, and the Fremen protect this valuable natural resource by using predator fish in their waters, which attack the incoming sand trouts. Interestingly, Arrakis used to be a wet planet a long time ago, and that's how there's a vast amount of sand. Just like the Saharan region was once an ocean. Naturally, sand trouts must have been introduced to the planet of Arrakis by some external being, after which point the sand became arid and hostile. The essential reason why a sand trout seeks to terraform a wet planet into a dry one is that the sandworms, or their final form, grow and thrive only in dry regions. According to Leto 2 Etriades in Children of Dune, the flat and leathery sand trouts look like diamond-shaped creatures with no heads, eyes, or extremities, and look like coarse interlacings of extruded cilia. Squeezing them releases a green syrup. These are essential water sealers and can die because of minute changes in temperature, resulting in a spice blow. The few sand trouts that survive enter a semi-dormant, cyst hibernation, and emerge 6 years later as large sandworms, about 3 meters long. However, not all of them survive, and only a small number of these 3-meter-long creatures develop and mature into fully grown sandworms. Now that they have grown and matured, water becomes highly toxic for them. Dealing with sandworms and their relationship with the Fremen. Despite the fact that sandworms resist eating humans because of the water content inside us, they could be hostile and extremely dangerous to humans or Fremen who respect them because of their territorial nature. The sandworms get attracted to, or rather get maddened by, the presence of electric force fields, used by the Fremen as a personal defense mechanism. In the novel Children of Dune, it was revealed that a weapon called the pseudo-shield was created with which a sandworm could be summoned to destroy anything in the vicinity. The Fremen have developed a special bond of sorts with the sandworms, and they have learned the ways to avoid these hulking monsters. The Fremen avoid sandworm attacks by moving in a similar fashion as desert creatures, and also use the natural sounds of the desert to avoid rhythmic vibrations. Furthermore, they have devised a device called the Thumper, which attracts a sandworm to a specific point. The Thumper's expressed function is to create a diversion for the Fremen to move onto or summon a worm ride. Riding the sandworms has developed as a coming-of-age ritual among Fremen, apart from serving as a mode of transportation. The teeth of sandworms serve as sacred knives, called the Chris knives, which are about 20 centimeters in length, and are extensively used in hand-to-hand combat. How have sandworms been represented in various Dune content? In the novel Dune, humans harvested the Spice Melange with great trouble, and respected the sandworms as divine creatures. However, anyone apart from the Fremen considered them as nothing but pests, and only a few knew how the sandworms were connected to the Spice Melange. However, in the 1976 novel Children of Dune, this changed drastically, and people constantly attempted to transport sandworms to different planets so that the Spice Melange could be created. In Children of Dune, Leto 2 consumes large amounts of Spice Melange. This not only gives him superhuman speed, strength, and stamina, but also allows him to live more than 3,500 years. Eventually, he transforms into a beast that is a hybrid between a sandworm and a human. During the events of God Emperor of Doom from 1981, he had exterminated all of the sandworms. Dune, 1984. Carlo Rambaldi created the sandworms in the 1984 film Dune, at a budget of around $2 million. Rambaldi had also created the titular creature for the 1982 film E.T., the Extraterrestrial. While the special effects screen stood at a massive 35 feet by 108 feet in height and breadth, the sandworms themselves were essentially created using practical effect models and miniature sets. The largest of the models used were about 25 feet in length, and cranes were used to help move the body. For background action, smaller versions were used. The miniseries Frank Herbert's Dune and Frank Herbert's Children of Dune, released in the years 2000 and 2003 respectively, primarily used visual effects to create the monster. Each of them won a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Special Visual Effects for a miniseries, movie, or a special. The man behind films like Arrival and the 2019 Blade Runner, Denis Villeneuve, is set to take the reins of the new Dune film, which should be the latest adaptation of Frank Herbert's much celebrated and loved Dune series. The film, however, will be based on the first half of the novel. The latter half will be brought to life in a sequel. Given the complexities of the Dune universe, it is only logical to picturize the film in 2 separate installments. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to send a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. For Marvelous Videos, I'm Rylan. Have a good one, and be safe.